Hello, just doing a quick little Twitter feed run through on this day, the 5th of this month of this year. 2 days, I guess, after the election. So, got a few tabs open here. We have ballots unharmed, but burst pipe delays absentee ballots. One thing I noticed with Twitter, I usually don't click through. They'll say, like, get local updates, get this, COVID, how to protect yourself, right? And you're not allowed to really say much about how to, an individual is not really allowed to say much, right? So if I click this, I've never clicked this. I always avoid it. I hate to say I'm even clicking it now, but I want to demonstrate, and I think I can after what I've seen there. Uh, yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. So you click through on these things, and it's like there's no links. Like this one, at least it is CDC stuff, which is like, I don't know. So this right here, out of all their things, is like the most legit, I guess you could say, depending on your opinions on the subject, right? But you click through and they're like, usually they just give you like some little header, splash image thing, and then they're like, COVID-19, how to protect yourself. Keep up to date with what you need to know um, during the global pandemic with information from health officials and agencies below. What you can do to slow the spread, what to do if you or someone close to you, da 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 da. And they just say this, but you can't click on anything. You know what I mean? It's like you literally can't click anything. And this looks like a link. It turns into the finger, but when I click it, it's nothing. So, and that's the way most of these are. But at least this one, sorry about the audio going in and out. It's just a driver issue. You go down through here, and it's various like CDC things, which is like, okay, at least there's something, even though it's not direct, it's just random CDC things. But I'm going to demonstrate that more with these other deals here, where it's like ballots unharmed, pipes burst, right? Come here, and it's just this little news blurb saying, while no ballots were damaged, the pipe burst has delayed absentee by mail processing operations by 4 hours. Election board members Mark Wingate said he believes they won't have results until Friday. So that's kind of interesting that it only delayed it by 4 hours, but then they won't have, this is on election day, but then they believe they won't have the results till Friday, which, whatever, it could be taken out of context and like merged together and stuff. According to the Atlanta Journal, Constitution counting of the absentee votes has ceased for the night and will resume on Wednesday after the election department sent ballot counters home. Fulton County is the most populated county in Georgia. So, yeah, that they're saying it will. I don't know. That doesn't sound right. And whenever I hear about pipe burst kind of delays, Georgia is not exactly known to be like a really cold state at all. I guess altitudes could vary, but is there a lot of varying altitude? Like, what caused this pipe to burst? Whatever. I'm just saying. I'm not saying it didn't legitimately happen or whatever, but it's suspect, right? Okay, let's see if I can find a better example. So this is like a really good example of what I was trying to allude to. Look into how absentee and mail ballots are, and it's supposed to say counted, right? Look into how absentee mail ballots are counted during the U.S. presidential elections. So I clicked on this from like one of the trending or news or whatever kind of little Twitter Explorer tabs, and you come down here and it's like, okay, following the president's claims regarding ballots during election day, which have been described as unsubstantiated by multiple outlets, including the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Guardian, multiple journalistic sources. Like, I think anybody who has any sort of like, back when academia like had substance, in my opinion, they would tell you like journalism is journalism. Like journalistic sources, you're allowed to use them, but like if you turn in an essay with more than just a very few journalistic sources, like those are just like tinsel. They're like sprinkling of nothing really. It's like almost if you just want to have journalism for the sake of like a journalistic opinion on it, but if you want, you're supposed to provide credible sources, and that's kind of like what we expect journalism to do, is we expect them to provide credible sources. But a lot of times journalism will say, oh, an inside source told me this, right? And things like that. So that's not, if you don't reveal your source so that the reader can go and look up and verify that source, it's not like you have to dig in. All you have to do is, even if it's an encyclopedia, you don't have to cite the encyclopedia source. You can just cite the encyclopedia. And then that person, if they want to, they can go to that encyclopedia, and then they can dig into that encyclopedia sources. You just give them, you just point over at the general rabbit hole that you got the information from. That is how the basics of how credible sourcing works. And, that's why you're not supposed to necessarily, you're always supposed to question journalistic articles. Always. That's a fact. But what we have here is they go on this little paragraph rant about Trump, and then they use the word fact checkers. And the two things I've ever noticed on Twitter that are big red flags are the term fact checkers or experts. And, they should be called opinion checkers. I could live with that. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to call them opinion checkers, sure. Then that's a lot more of a gray area of like, oh, here's people that like, doesn't that put it in more perspective? Because it's like, it's not a fact. There's very little such thing, if even, of a fact to begin with, right? A fact is like the speed of light. There's nothing that we know of that actually travels at the speed of light. Even light itself does not travel at the speed of light. I'm sorry to inform you if you didn't know. The best we have is near approaching the speed of light in the vacuum of space. There's always resistance out there. There's no perfect vacuum. But we have this theoretical speed of light in one direction if there was this theoretical perfect environment for it to travel in, right? But we know it's always less than that. So, but instead of saying near approaching the speed of light in a vacuum of space every time, we'll just say speed of light, right? Kind of use it a little more loosely. Well, that's the way that facts are too, is it's like facts is a loose term because what's fact? There's no such thing as scientific fact, right? We know that science establishes theories, and we try our best to respect those theories. And, if we don't, that can lead to things like falling off a cliff. If you don't respect the theory that there's gravity and gravitational pulls and, matter at whatever densities and things like that. And so we respect that science. And if you don't, at one point, you're going to walk into a wall or walk off a cliff, right? But it's still theory. That is still theory. You know what I mean? Because it's like, I don't want to go too far out on the limb with how I explain it, but things are just waiting to be disproven, And it's like, if I were to say, there's always a context around it, right? If I were to say, if you keep walking in that direction, you will fall off a cliff. That is a theory. And I might, we prove those theories right as much as we can. And the thing is that we're supposed to attempt to prove them wrong. That's what science is about, is disproving theories, Like, I have a theory that you won't fall off the cliff, or a postulation, I should say, which that's definitely, those two terms get used a little bit more interchangeable maybe than they should, but a postulation is more like the hypothesis, right? Where you say like, I think you'll fall off the cliff, or I think you won't fall off the cliff, or however you want to view that. The junior high science projects, middle school science projects, whatever, that's the basic scientific method. Well, the thing is, I can say every test, I'm warning you, do not walk off that cliff. Every single test we've ever done, the person falls to their death. And we don't want to see that happen to you. You know what I mean? And we've run thousands of tests over 100 years. You know what I mean? Are you going to question that theory? Well, you didn't realize that person had a hang glider that went walking off that cliff with a hang glider on their back. Nobody ever ran the test of walking off that cliff with a hang glider on their back, or with a parachute, or something like that, so, or a rocket pack, or whatever, or some little new Lego block, some industrious Lego block they made that they could just snap in front of themselves with each step, and it would create a path, or anti-gravity shoes in the future, or whatever, you know. So at that point, that would prove that theory wrong within that context, right? It doesn't mean that everybody's bad who said that before, that, you know, that wasn't possible. It's just saying that science is an evolving thing, and the same things with facts. And I'm not trying to, like, you know, spin the idea of like right and wrong necessarily, or I'm not trying to push it crazy, but I'm just trying to put it in perspective. Facts are near approaching the speed of light in a vacuum of space. You know, there is no such thing as a solid fact. We can't prove anything. We can't prove our exact existence as a fact. You know, who knows that we're not in some dream state or something, or in the so-called matrix, right, or anything like that. So we're just doing the best we can with what we've got and what we've seen so far and what we think we know. So there are no fact checkers. You know what I mean? There's no archive of factual data to go and reference this stuff. So that's scary. I know, and I realize the term is used loosely, but it's one of those whipping terms that's thrown out there that's like, hey, this is you know, the fact checkers have checked this. They've stressed the importance. The experts, you know. And I think, if anything, these days should show us that there really are no experts. You know, it's the same thing, fact and experts. You know, facts, basically something that an expert might say. And an expert is who? You know, they're accredited by whom? You could take somebody like Rand Paul, where there's a particular, more established medical institution that doesn't recognize his credentials as I guess as an eye doctor. I haven't looked into him in a while. I'm trying to look up more facts as I talk about him now, but I don't want to take too much time. But if we go in here, Rand Paul on his Wikipedia page, and we scroll, let's see if I can find this without taking up too much time. So obviously a lot to do with politics, but he's actually a doctor, and that's the line right there. Is if I say he's a doctor, right? And everybody's entitled to their own interpretation of this, whatever. I respect it either way, but where can we say here? Maybe it's works. It's a whole lot about his political stuff. And his dad as well, pretty similar story. Rand Paul. Oh, come on. Saul personal life. This article's must have been heavily edited since I've been here. Oh, what a bummer. Really? You've got to be kidding me. That's a trip. They've edited this article. So when was I here? I'm pretty sure it was this one. Is there a medical career? Okay. National Board of Ophthalmology. Let's see here. After completing his residency in ophthalmology, Paul moved to Bowling Green, Kentucky. He has held state-issued medical license since moving there in 1993. He received his first job from John Downing. Downing McPeak's Vision Centers brought him here. Worked before creating his own practice. Faced a couple lawsuits. Which that happens to doctors. That's why one of the reasons why prices are so expensive. They have to have malpractice insurance because, you know, there's a lot of possibility for things to go wrong. In 1995, he passed that ABO board's exam. Prior to this, ABO had changed its certification program, which had previously awarded lifetime credentials instead of requiring doctors to recertify every 10 years. Those who had already been given lifetime certification were allowed to keep it. According to the ABO, they were not legally have been able to rescind these certifications. Shortly after this change, Paul began a campaign to protest it. This effort culminated in 1997 with him creating, along with 200 other young ophthalmologists, the National Board of Ophthalmology, NBO, to offer an alternative certification system at a cost substantially lower than that of the ABO. Its certification exam, an open book take-home test, was described by one taker as probably harder and more clinically relevant than the ABO's exam. National board members and his father-in-law. So anyway, so he helped develop something that was more relevant, according to at least this source, right? Was probably more relevant than the existing exam, and like a better thing. It was more affordable, everything. It was just like sort of anti-establishment, so to speak, right? So I think that's pretty cool. But by doing that, it's like, well, there used to be a lot of flack for him for not being a member of this board and not recertifying, I think. Something along those lines, if I have that right. I don't know. I didn't really prepare to talk about that exact subject there. But the reason I brought that up, now I forgot the reason I do that. My apologies. I go off on tangents and don't always remember. That was something to do with like facts and like the variances and stuff like that. So it's like everything's evolving. I'll just spin it back around to that. Maybe I'm slightly on point with that. Everything's evolving, and it's always up for change. It's always up for debate and stuff like that. So that it's just a thing of like, don't necessarily trust so-called experts, especially from one source, And that's okay. I think the reason I said that was that because on the topic of experts, like so-called experts. So it's like, is he an expert? Because if he's not accredited by that original ABO, then which standard do you want to go by? If you looked into both of them, you might find, like, just for the sake of the argument, let's say we look into both of them and we find out, yeah, not only is his thing that he created with 200 other people that like maybe way more relevant and all this kind of stuff, instead of just being like this money gathering establishment operation, more so to speak, then he could be considered an expert, right? But it's the same thing with like college degrees. There's like national accreditation, right? And then there's I'm forgetting the different type. Regional accreditation, like the more brick and mortar colleges are like regionally accredited, and in general, that's supposedly the true proper college degree. And there's a lot of rigor that goes behind those regional. I mean, there's a lot of rigor that goes behind both, but I think most of us could agree that in most situations, there's extreme rigor that anybody with any college experience, there's a pretty extreme rigor that goes behind a regional accreditation, right? But that's not to say that national accreditations aren't fairly rigorous and on point, like they might be more relevant to the field that those degrees are serving, but less as a quote unquote like liberal arts degree, I barely have touch and go college experience with like, both regional establishment and the sort of like online national style. I've taken courses at through both types of institutions and stuff. And that was my exact experience, was like, wow, I think it was DeVry I took at least a sample course through, if I remember correctly. And one of the things was like about business communication and stuff. And I thought like, it wasn't difficult. That sample course was not difficult, but I learned a lot. I learned about like creating a sandwich letter, the business format, how to sandwich the information in and all that. So it's something to this day I still draw on a lot of, like more than half the regional college courses I took. But it wasn't rigorous. It wasn't anything. It just stuck with me because it was practical. It was relevant. And that's how it stuck with me. But then when I took the regional stuff, I remember reading in the, what do you call those things? When you first take a class, what do they call that thing that, it's like the agenda for the class? The itinerary? Syllabus, yeah. The syllabus is the thing that, when I was reading that in my college level English class, and by college level I mean like just over the hump, for anything less would have basically been high school level, but for some reason I always surprise myself with like writing. I it's one of the things I find the most challenging, but I seem to always get like a better grade than I expect, and something that I avoid. But I'm not good at math either per se, but at least math is kind of like a little bit more black and white as far as the answers go and stuff. And you can just, it's like formulated, which I've learned to develop more and more with writing. But anyway, so it was basically what you would probably call a 101. I think it was like a 110 or 120 in the particular community college I was going to. And the instructor had said in the syllabus that this was going to be an overwhelming type of experience or whatever, or that we would receive an overwhelming amount of work. And I thought, that's really weird that somebody who's like teaching an English class, a writing class, that they would use the word overwhelming. Like, shouldn't they just say like intense or something else, rigorous, I guess, even? But overwhelming, that means overwhelmed. That, like literally, that I just felt like they were probably using like a term that wasn't quite appropriate. Well, it turned out the course was overwhelming. That was my first taste of college, and I learned pretty quickly that like a lot of those courses that were this was one of those credit systems where it's like, I don't know, maybe classes, I think the most were like 4 credits per term. So the 3 and 4 credit classes were pretty intense. Those were the overwhelming classes, and then the 1 or 2 credit classes were pretty easy to slide by. And so this was like a 3 or 4 credit class, and it was just like literally that's what it was. Like, I learned the hard way that like these instructors, their whole plan fluctuates because they're just trying to like push you to your limits, right? And stuff like that. So I ended up having to drop the class because of particular circumstances, which was, I kind of consider a blessing in disguise. I wouldn't do it. I would not drop the class for anything. I was like, this is the last class I'm going to drop. But living circumstances made it virtually impossible. I would like to think that somebody, I imagine there's definitely people out there that could have pulled it off. I couldn't. I tried very hard, and I couldn't. And then it was interesting to find out, it was just an overwhelming amount of stress. I was staying at a homeless shelter. It's very difficult to find a place to quietly work on homework there. It's interesting. They have like game rooms and multiple TV rooms and stuff where people are just loud and obnoxious and everything, but they didn't have any sort of study room like whatsoever. And I thought, wow, really? You couldn't just turn like one of these rooms into a study room? And I'd stayed at this homeless shelter multiple times in the past, and when I originally stayed there, it was like an old little hotel motel thing converted into a shelter, right? So they actually still had like the desk, the little table and chair in those rooms. So in theory, it could have been possible to pull it off then, because then I could like actually sit at a desk and have like a little lamp and do homework. But that second to last time, I guess, that I had stayed there, when I was trying to do the college thing, there wasn't that, and you're literally like on a bunk bed, like all hunkered over and stuff, like trying to do your homework, and just plus or minus 5 people packed in each little room and stuff. So it's just like, I would do a little tiny bit of homework like that, and then it's like next thing you know, you're cramping up, laying on your side, with inadequate lighting and stuff, trying to just do that. So then I would go into like the dining hall area in the back of there, where they had like a game area for people to play like cards and board games, I guess. And I would go back in there. I'd actually coincidentally earlier tutored other people going to college, and I thought like, oh, I might as well go myself. I'm in this circumstance, I'll get the financial aid and get in that debt trap or whatever, and that won't happen to me. I'll sail right through it, right? Yeah, right. Anyway, and then next thing you know, sure enough, people are coming back in there, playing their music on their cell phones, talking loud and stuff, and it's just like, you could just 99% of the time, it just really wasn't happening. It just was not a good environment. And then finally, towards the tail end, I realized like they had this little like laundry room thing that just had a washer and dryer that the people could go in and do their clothes. and all that kind of thing. I thought, oh wow, I'm gonna sneak into here, and then it's just like a dryer running, and I can sit on top of this dryer. It wasn't the most comfortable place in the world, but I'll tell you what, compared to all the other options, it was like study paradise. But that was too little too late when I found that, because they informed me shortly after that I was going to be kicked out of there, and citing the reason that I'd just been there too long, which was kind of interesting because I had talked to them just a few short weeks earlier, and they said that all I needed to do was get into college and get that ball rolling, and that, I could have a fair amount of time. There wouldn't be any surprises like that. And then the very same person who had told me that gave me that news, and I was pretty bummed out about that. I didn't pitch a fit over it, and coincidentally, the night before that 2-week limit to get out of there was up, my bunkie was hit by a car and nearly killed. It turns out he survived, to my knowledge. I never saw him again, but just with all of that, I left, and I went and lived under a bridge and tried to finish out college, and it didn't work out. It was the very end of that term, and then the next term I thought, I'll play this smart. I'll do a weightlifting class so that I can get access to the gym shower before my day at college, and I'll go in there and do go take the shower and have that as my first class of the day, and then I'll be showered up. Nobody will really know I live under the bridge and stuff. But it got bad. It was like, for one thing, I had heard of people doing that. I knew a lot of homeless people, and I knew the ropes of, thank God, of a lot of ways to pull stuff off. And it was just like you had to go check out a towel, and that was getting really weird, but I kept doing it, and I would go check out a towel, and they were like, and then pretty soon it just turned out to where there would be like nobody in the place to check out a towel. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So I could not even get my shower in. Like, what? Am I going to go just take a shower and not have a towel? And cause whatever, so that wasn't working out. And then it turned out I was the only person. It was those open gym showers, they weren't like little stalls or anything. They're just, I don't know why they can't, they give you a stall around a toilet. I don't know why those places can't give you a stall around a shower head, or at least a curtain, So there I am, trying to wash out my butt crack and stuff, scrubbing, doing that kind of cleaning in there. And it's I'm dirty. I'm a guy, not insanely dirty. I wasn't digging through trash cans or anything, I wasn't usually too dirty in that regard, but I was dirty just in sometimes it was days between when I would get a shower, and I'm not living indoors. I'm living under a bridge and stuff. So there's it's definitely I couldn't just do the 5-second, rinse off for 30 seconds kind of shower or something. I had to really clean. And then, even if I got that far, which I did a fair amount of times, then it was then I had to go into this gym class, and for it was at least an hour. It might have been more, but you'd have to go in there and just work out. And if you weren't constantly working out, you'd get docked. So it was that kind of offset the shower. Then it's okay, well, now I'm all sweaty from this gym class. I'm going to take another shower and stuff. And then the thing too was it's I'm living like a homeless dude, so I don't exactly have energy. I already walk around town all day. You know what I mean? I'm already living off as a vegan too, especially living off some chips and hummus and stuff. And they do this whole thing where they delay you even getting your financial aid. So they don't want to give you your financial aid too early because they don't want you to just run off and blow it. And it's well, check it out. I qualified for that stuff, which says I need it, right? I would assume. And I can't even eat, I'm already enrolled in school. You're not even going to let me pay for my classes yet. It's going to run me right up to that deadline to pay for my classes then you find out whether or not financial aid even goes through, right? So they make sure to get that debt above your head one way or the other. And then, you get it and you're living off fruit roll-ups from the library snack bar. Like, I mean, literally, that's like the kind of stuff it was, or like Cliff Bars and stuff. And which Cliff Bars I've done, my teeth are falling out of my head from eating so many of those things. But, um, so it's like a guy that has been living off fruit roll-ups for a freaking month, and the occasional like chips and hummus and stuff like that. And like, I'm not in a condition to be like, I have tremendous strength for being or back then when I was so skinny and sucked up, like literally homeless, like skin and bones kind of thing, and freaking, I don't know. I guess I feel like I'm making excuses at this point, but that's just I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm just painting the picture and not trying to be boohoo or nothing like that. That's just painting the picture of some of the reality of some people in that situation. And ironically enough, that year I won the so-called lottery for Section 8 housing, where I qualified for free housing for life anywhere in the United States. And it just happened to be, at least here, I don't know if it was like nationwide or statewide or how far the spread was on it, but here it was like one of the worst rental markets in like over a decade, probably, in whatever historic context. So it's just so difficult to find a place to rent. And to top it off, I was totally broke and homeless, so I couldn't even pay. The one thing I had to do was pay the, the credit check, right? So I had to pay, I don't even know how much they were. I know that the last time I'd had a place, they were at least $30, and recently they're like more like $60 now, so they were at least $30. I couldn't afford it, and so I'm thinking like they help you with everything except the credit check. Like what they know, like I'm out of a homeless shelter. Like really, like I don't know. It's just so weird. So I'm like living under the bridge with this thing they call the golden ticket. It's like this yellow folder with like my Section 8 HUD housing info in it and stuff. And all I got to do is find a place to rent somewhere, which like I said, the market was like one of the worst in history at that moment. Like even a guy who had enough money for a credit check was cleaner cut looking, a little bit older gentleman than me, and was just able, not going to college at the same time like I was, not living under a bridge, all those kinds of things. Even him beating his feet on the street every hour of every day that he could, it took him like, I want to say plus or minus a solid month to get into a place, but he did, thank God. I didn't. And one of my other things that I did in hindsight, I probably wouldn't do again, but I don't regret it. I mean, on one hand I do, and on the other I don't. But I felt so guilty when I left that place, which I had that golden ticket right before they kicked me out, and I guess they figured like, oh, he'll be fine. He's got that golden ticket, which really shouldn't have been any of their business to begin with. But I have to assume maybe because it was so bizarre how they just kicked me out after they just said they wouldn't. But I wanted to take people with me because according to the HUD program up here, at least, I imagine it's like a federal program, so it should be the same, I'd imagine, but you don't have to just go rent like a little dinky ghetto 1-room apartment or whatever for yourself. It's not like that. What it is it's like, there is a window of how much they'll pay and stuff, to the best of my recollection, like within reason. It didn't seem like really strict. It seemed very reasonable. And but if you wanted, like say you wanted to, the only thing on the market was like a 3-bedroom house or something, right? You can rent that if you can find 2 other people to rent it with you. And here's the cool thing is that, I mean, coming from a very poor person who has an honest perspective about, like, not necessarily milking the system, but trying to just use it as good leverage to like get going and be a contributing member, productive member to society to the best of their ability, is that you can have other people live with you, whether that person's rich or dirt poor, and HUD will basically apply to them as well. So as long as they're living with you, that you have the HUD golden ticket, so to speak, right? But if that person is gonna be your roommate and rent another bedroom, then if they happen to lose their job or something, then HUD will cover them until they're able to find another job. So they effectively become a HUD lottery winner while they're living under that roof, while they're in dire straits, until they're able to get back on their feet again, which, it seemed like there's a strong possibility for people to potentially milk that system in that regard. But I like to look at it towards the positive of like, I wouldn't be the type, I want to say, that would necessarily do that. I would use it as leverage to try and do better. But yeah, so that being said, what I thought is like, there's no way I'm just going to go greedily if anybody's listened to any of my other podcasts or screencasts or whatever you call this, rants, that I've considered myself an extreme leftist liberal for the last quarter century, for the last 25 years. And, being so, I would never just go and, I'd rather live under a bridge. And I think I could say that literally, that I'd rather live under a bridge and almost die than go get one of those apartments for myself and be that quote unquote greedy or whatever about it. So I tried to have other people come in with me, which they told me was fine. That HUD program, which was in the next town over, had told me that it was fine to do that. And that was, basically encouraged, kind of a thing. But the thing is then I started seeing, it took a lot of life experience to see people's true colors. And I wouldn't say don't write on my experience. I don't think that everybody's like this, but overall it's shocking, because when you're in those homeless shelters, a lot of people use them to clean up, get a shower, get off the streets, stuff like that. And that's badass. Like, that's really cool. But at the same time, a lot of those people, like half of them, are like total drunkards, total, like, more. I've been around people who are drinkers to the point where it causes problems in their lives. And even, you could probably even argue that at certain points in my life, maybe it was, or maybe I was just having a real low point and I happened to drink too. I don't know if I could necessarily, I haven't had huge drinking problems throughout my life, so I'm not trying to compare myself to them, but I'm not trying to act like I'm some perfect angel. But yeah, these people just were mind blowing. Like, I hadn't experienced that till I've been there, where to see like just total black and white, where these people sober in this homeless shelter, and you're like, wow, these are really cool people and stuff, and I'd love to live with them. I'd love to help them and extend this opportunity I have to help them out as well. But then when you run into them when they're back out on the streets and whatnot, it's a whole nother picture. It's a completely, just really a flip picture. And those were, for the most part, the people that I was trying to bring in with me turned out to be those kind of people, unfortunately. And even if it wasn't necessarily like their drinking per se or whatever problem they had, it was just the fact that they didn't take it serious. I would ask them like, hey, I need this paperwork from you or whatever, just fill out this paper, like I can help you do it, and I need to submit this upstream to these people so that we can get you in the program too and stuff. And I basically had, like, to the best of my recollection, it's been some years now, it's like 6 years ago now, so I had one person at least on there, and then that person wasn't coming through with their end of the deal, and I felt really bad because we talked about it and stuff, and I didn't want to just the fact of erasing them off of there was just so, made me sick to think about having to do that. I don't remember if I specifically did erase them off or just what happened with that, but then I tried to add a different person on, and this had only been like a month, and the HUD place had told me, if you need, because of the rental market, if you need to extend this out a few months, just contact us every month and let us know, no problem. After that first month, I told them I was already under the bridge by then and everything, and I was like, hey, I need to please extend this one more month. And I think the correspondence was over email, and they got back with me and were like, oh, fine, we'll do it this one time, but you don't get any other extensions, and here I am living under a bridge, going to college and whatnot, and it was just like, so it didn't happen. I still have the folder and paperwork to this day, and it's just like, wow, what a trip, what a freaking trip. So that's just that experience with that stuff, but sorry about the rant. Hope it was interesting enough if you're still there. So yeah, this whole thing of looking into how absentee and mail-in ballots are counted during the presidential election, where's the look? Where's the look into it? Following the president's claim, they're going to cite 3 arguably left-wing journalistic places, predominantly anyway, against the predominantly right-wing president, right? And fact checkers stress the importance of mail-in and absentee ballots and the process behind how they are counted. Okay, so for one thing, the keywords to notice here are mail-in and absentee ballots. Like, wait a minute, there's a difference? And there is. I don't know if this totally clarifies it enough, but the thing is that it's push versus pull. Absentee ballot is a pull system where you say, hey, I have some reason, shouldn't really matter too much what reason it is, but I have some reason that I can't make it to the polls or choose not to go to the polls or whatever. Can you please send me a ballot to a current address, even if it's general delivery, right? I used general delivery for like 10 freaking years as a homeless person. The only thing I couldn't do was renew my car insurance through another provider through it, but I was able to do everything else through general delivery. So it's like, that's an absentee ballot. That's how the president himself votes. And that's what he has said is, I vote absentee ballot. I have no problem with it. Like, there's that. But then there's this mail-in, this so-called mail-in. And this is a push system where they just go to their registrar, whatever. The registrar goes to the register of mailed ballot people, like, I guess in California, for instance, it must be anybody who's ever requested a mail-in ballot at any point in their freaking life. And they automatically send you a ballot. They don't send you a thing that says, hey, if this is you, write down your driver's license or identification number and sign your name and say that you want a mail-in ballot or something. They don't even do that. They just auto mail the ballot. And they don't even check if it's, there's no cross-referencing system. Like, they don't even apparently look at the DMV to see, like, nothing to see if that's your current address and any sort of weight to the validity. They better just send it out, And I'm saying this because in California, where I'm originally born and raised from, as much as I might not want to admit that, but it's me, right? So I lived in a place around the year 2000. I moved in 99, and I was out by, I must have been out by mid 2002. So I was there pretty much exactly 3 years, to the best of my recollection. And I could have, but I don't ever remember getting a ballot mailed to me there. That's what's bizarre. But let's give the state the benefit of the doubt and say that at some point I requested a mail ballot, which is weird because I don't vote. Like, that's my thing. I feel like not voting is a vote, I'm pretty sure I have voted a couple times in the past, and if I did, it would have 99.9% chance have been for a third party candidate. I don't think I've ever voted for a single Democrat or Republican in my life. So anyway, and even if I did get an absentee ballot, the most likely situation would have been my mom pressuring me to do so and getting it mailed to her address. So getting one mailed to my actual residence was that just doesn't seem like me, So anyway, let's give the state the benefit of the doubt and say, hey, Ralph Nader, I can remember, was running as a third party, I guess, Green candidate at that time. And maybe I did. Maybe I said, hey, give me an absentee ballot. I want to vote for Nader this year, 2000-ish, and whatever. So let's say that happened, and I did or didn't get that ballot at that time, but my address got sent out. Well, since then, I've moved, and California driver's licenses don't last that long. They don't last for very many years. I don't think they're even 5 years to my recollection. So, and I want to say the license I had when I moved in that house would have been, even if it just got refreshed, say that my license got refreshed in 2002 or something, and it still had that address in it. And then it's like, would that not be expired by 2005 when I moved out of the state? I don't know. But anyway, to this day, that's 2002. I last lived there, halfway through 2002. To this day, in 2020, they are still automatically mailing me a ballot to that address because my uncle lives there now. So he saves my ballot for me whenever it comes. And I guess he has them off to the side. Like, I could probably go back and find a ballot from like 2008 or something there, I'm guessing. But according to what I've heard, I received a ballot this year as well, automatically mailed to me there. So how, and the thing is I registered once. I lived in Portland, and I remember registering to vote on the side of the street there, on like Burnside, literally, if I remember correctly. And downtown Portland, Burnside, right? If you know the city, you know that road at least. And freaking on the west side of the river. And I would have done like a nonpartisan type of third party. I think I would have just done nonpartisan to the best of my ability with that registration. So that right there, I have to wonder, like, how did that not like cancel out the California thing? Do they not like at least kind of like share that information, you know? And then there's always this pressure to like do it exactly like it's on your license, because you don't want to get like double dosed with jury duty, right? Because they pull from voter registration and driver's license to get those records, right? To do for jury duty. So it should have been really narrow margin for error. I mean, it probably would have been like a capitalization or a period or something like that, like if anything. But my information should have been virtually identical, you know? So there's that. And then that makes me wonder too, is like, I was homeless for a chunk in Portland, but I would say most of the time I was there, I had a residence, even if it was like literally living in a closet or on somebody's couch. And that I would have written one of those addresses down at that time if I lived there, I'm pretty sure. So I have to wonder if Oregon is a state that does quote unquote mail-in voting. So are they pushing a ballot out? Did they push a ballot out this year? And you're talking about like Oregon and that's the Multnomah County area, right? Huge, always a landslide victory for the Democrats in that county. And then you go to California, always a landslide victory for the Democrats, right? I mean, in any recent decades. So it's like, you gotta wonder with those whole theories of what they say about how legit these elections are, and that there's no room, like, oh, election fraud. Even Twitter on its own thing right here says, and this, you know, as I leave this page, just to say like how ridiculous, right? They're saying a look into how absentee ballots are counted during the presidential elections, and they give you this stupid tweet. And the only link is to this person who took the picture. And then you scroll down, what's happening? It's a bunch of junk, like, and then it's just onto the Twitters. Onto Twitter, here's a person they're censoring. There's what's happening. Oh, here's what the Washington Post has to say, just with one of their recent posts. Like, it's just nothing. It's nothing. And Twitter tells us that we're supposed to trust them, and then they just like give you this little blurb and throw you off a cliff. And that's typical. This is typical with those trending things there. But if we go back to twitter.com/explore, which is a little gateway into their garbage bin, in my opinion, you can come in here and see all this junk, right? So somewhere in here, they have more news from their experts. Al Gore is going to discuss, yeah. Oh, wow. See stuff that triggering me. Greta triggering me. Philadelphia triggering me. Voting by mail is legal and safe. Experts and data confirmed. I don't know if memories already, maybe that's the one I was just on, but they're saying, you know, no, it wasn't, because they were like a look into, right? And right here they're saying, here's experts, right? The other one was fact checkers. Here's experts. Okay, we'll open that in another tab. Then we come down here. Voter fraud of any kind is exceedingly rare in the U.S. Election experts confirm. Experts? Really? Because from what I understand, it's illegal to represent a particular party, and if you're working at a poll, and there's been a lot of people wearing, sorry to pick on this woman here, I know she's voting most likely and not a poll worker, so my apologies in advance, but I'm just using her wonderful face here to do an example of the people wearing the Biden-Harris mask. They're working the polls, and I've seen, I wasn't able to dig in and absolutely confirm that those people were working at the polls because it was like Twitter clips and stuff like that, but they're wearing Biden-Harris masks, and it's like, you're not supposed to show partisanship, you know what I mean? And it's like, are there people counting votes with Biden-Harris masks on? I don't see people counting votes with Trump masks on. People would throw a fit if there was people doing that. So here it is. As vote counting continues and with results yet to be called in states such as Nevada and Pennsylvania, experts and officials say there is no evidence of widespread voter fraud. So here's another thing where they take that and manipulate, like, no evidence of widespread voter fraud. So that's like just saying, if somebody's like saying, hey, there's a boogeyman, and then they come in and say, there's no evidence of a giant boogeyman that lives on the moon. And it's like, well, nobody necessarily said that there's a giant boogeyman that lives on the moon, but they're saying there might be a boogeyman, right? And that's the thing, is like, these elections that are razor thin margins like this come down to a handful of counties. So it doesn't take widespread issues to have voter fraud. You could just literally have voter fraud in a single digit number of counties, and that could throw an election. So that's what matters here. And one of the counties that this is supposedly being investigated in is one county, one of the hottest counties in Arizona, not by temperature, but by trumpeture. And the state officials have come out and said, Sharpies are accepted. And supposedly the machine manufacturers have come out and say, yeah, Sharpies, preferred way to do it and everything. And that's fine. I'm not saying those people are lying. I'm saying that I would think that those people are probably telling the truth and very kind-hearted, honest people. But what's going on in that county? All those states, they admit all they can do is, and this is something I just saw with Pennsylvania, very nice woman, very well-spoken, mannered, everything, for Pennsylvania, speaking on, I think it was Fox News, maybe CNN, I don't remember, but anyway, she was speaking about just sort of giving testimony about the best of her knowledge about how stuff goes down and everything, and I believe she's a Democrat too. But don't quote me on that. I don't remember for sure. But anyway, she said, and I have to think this goes for a lot of states from the way I see the way stuff works, is they have laws, of course, but they also just give guidance and stuff like that, So it's like there could be exceptions to the rule, even if the state says, hey, every county, you have to take a Sharpie, right? Like that has to work. Well, a lot of these systems, from what I'm seeing anyway, is that you supposedly, it's sort of weird, but I guess they're trying to like make it like not entirely digital, but not entirely paper or something, but you'll like have a ballot, or you like fill it out on a digital machine and then it gives you a ballot, and then you turn that in and that gets scanned, or whatever combination of that happens to be. But one of the claims that I've heard, and I'm not saying whether or not it's true, it's just what I've heard, I'll let the officials tell me, I'll respect those opinions if their checks and balances check out and all that the investigation is into whether or not those cards like are being rejected. Like, yeah, even if the manufacturer says something, there's warranties on equipment, right? Like not all equipment works the way it's described. There's cars that are lemons under the quote-unquote lemon law, right? Where you get a car and it's like, hey, all the paint's going to peel off your car in a year. And they might not have ever intended that to happen. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But the United States has lemon laws to where they go, hey, if something weird happens like that, or the seatbelts just fall off, or airbags explode randomly, it might be the vast minority of cases when that happens, but it happens sometimes, right? So even if somebody at like whatever particular motor company comes out and says, hey, our airbags are thoroughly tested, they go off when they are supposed to, right? They can say that claim and mean it wholeheartedly and honestly, and I would assume even pass a lie detector without being psychotic about it, and airbags could still malfunction. You know, even that woman, one of the heads of state in Pennsylvania that I'm talking about, she had even made a statement where she was like, no, there's, you know, no voter fraud to speak of. And then she quickly retracted, in all honesty, it seemed like, and said, wait, there was one case that came to mind. And she said it was weeks earlier. And it was one guy had tried to get a ballot for his deceased mother and they caught it, you know? So that says that there was a pool, not necessarily that wasn't any evidence of push voter fraud, right? I think with my basic experience of what I've just said was an instance where there's potential for push-based voter fraud, right? To my knowledge, my uncle's always saved my ballots. He's never, ever even opened them or anything. He just knows, because I'm pretty sure he votes by, you know, he's a very intelligent person. He knows what something is without necessarily opening the envelope or whatever. But, you know, and I think that's really cool of him too, because as far as I know, he's like me, and you'd be pretty hard pressed to vote conservative, but I want to imagine that he would, maybe in a situation like this. But anyway, you know, but there's a potential there for somebody in that type of situation to say like, hey, and they could either fill it out and send it back unsigned, or fill it out and forge, or whatever. There's a lot of potential for that. So to say that that can't happen, and yeah, in California, it's like it's so swamped with Democrat votes that it's like, even if it doesn't seem like it make a difference, but why is it such a landslide in California? That's what I gotta wonder. You know, maybe there is a lot of that going on. But anyway, I don't know. I think you get the picture. I kind of lost myself again there. It's a good thing I don't have rewind and could pick up where I left off, or I'd probably just keep going. But it's just basically that there is that potential. We can't rule anything. It comes back down to the thing like the fact and the approaching the speed of light and all that, where to completely rule something out, even if everybody else has their best honest intentions and stuff, to shut it down and say, nope, you know, there's da-da-da-da-da, or there's, like right here, they're saying there's no widespread voter fraud, no evidence of widespread voter fraud. And it's like, yeah, I can agree with that. I feel like no direct evidence of widespread voter fraud, like right now in this current election. But how do you define widespread? You know what I mean? Like, it just has to be in key areas. And we know that most of the areas where this seems to be going on, potentially half or more of the areas, are suspect. You know, Georgia's the one that said whatever, it's going to take them extra days. All these places, it's like, I don't know. I don't want to get into the thick of it. There's this whole argument, I would say, that like they waited till the last minute to count the votes. Like they didn't want to count ahead for some reason. It's better to be behind and have all this controversy than it is to count a week ahead of time or something. That personally just doesn't make sense to me, but whatever. I don't want to get into the thick of that. So most U.S. elections, whether from foreign or domestic players, comes in the form of misinformation campaigns. Ooh, that's interesting. Officials and experts warn that most interference in U.S. elections, whether from foreign or domestic players, comes in the form of misinformation campaigns, many of which are intended to create distrust in the U.S. election process. You could definitely say that, like, whatever candidates have put that information out there, and, you know, I would hope that maybe from the argument that I've put up that you could say that it's definitely worth, especially like with Trump, you know, he's definitely on the side of the coin where it's like, okay, they're probably going to pick on him. You know, it's probably just, you know, just whatever. I want to assume you have the amount of intelligence to discern that to whatever degree for yourself. Like I said, I'm not saying that that's necessarily widespread occurring and to whatever degree, but I'm saying that, yeah, in a few little key niche areas, you know, I feel like even though I'm leaning conservative, and I never do, but I hold values on both sides of the line, and I'm much more centrist. But towards the beginning of this year, when I started following Trump, when this whole COVID thing hit, all of a sudden everything was just madness. I felt like everybody was just rubber doll idiots that had lost any or all sense of logic that I assumed that they might have had. And in the media everywhere, and I was just like, whoa, where's our just scientific process? And like not necessarily trusting wholeheartedly right out the gate countries like China and Italy, that if you look at the past, propaganda or not, like Italy was the axis of evil, China to whatever degree, so those were countries that in worldwide wars we fought against that. You know what I mean? Not that I necessarily agree with everything. I prefer that there would be no wars and stuff like that, most definitely. And I would consider myself more of an anti-war than a pro-war person. Like I would say, avoid going to war at all costs, at all within any type of reason. Like all of that type of a thing. Like I'm not like, oh, supposedly these people didn't go bomb them. I'm not that type of attitude by far. And but that being said, like I feel like in World War II, I would have wanted to be Woody Guthrie. Woody Guthrie was the guy with the guitar that says "This machine kills fascists." Folk singer inspired Dylan, right? Like that was the person from that era that I most identified with, from my limited knowledge and history or whatever. And so I basically would have been the guy that was called the commie, and that's my assumption anyway. And then even if you go into like the late 60s and stuff like that, and I look at like the Panthers movement of that era, the old Panthers, right? Stuff like that, I look at it like even then I would still have been a liberal. But now when you get into this age, I don't see it. I can't play that dumb, And I think even back then, there was whatever BS going on behind the scenes to where like, I don't try and go along with anybody's parade just to do it or anything like that. But, I don't think that like whatever so-called liberal groups back then were totally pure by any means. But I think I could have got suckered into going along with them a little more than I would have wanted to in hindsight. And I definitely wouldn't have crossed the line, at least this is my assumptions, right? I wouldn't have crossed the line and said, hey, I'm going to lean conservative this election. And if I were to vote, which I didn't, not even in this election, that I would have, I think I would have still picked the liberal candidate. Not necessarily a Democrat, but probably most likely a third party. I've never been suckered into the Democrats' stuff. I've always felt like they're half-assed, for lack of a better term, just the slightly lesser of two evils. And I've always considered conservatism, just personally, to be. I grew up in a family and household that I felt like during the early years of my life, it was the Reagan 80s, the Bush Senior era, all that when I was an infant, it was the tail end of the Carter era. And then I felt like I was raised in that, and the 1980s and the Reagan 80s and all that. By the time I became a teenager, I was over that. I was like, bring the 90s on, like that type of a thing. I'm way more liberal now once I identified any politics, but I still wasn't buying Clinton's BS. That's what's so funny but I would, right before the election, I would be like, man, that guy, like the second time when he ran for re-election, I was like, the first time I was like, not about it. I couldn't even believe my conservative grandparents. He's the one who got California to swing blue, to flip blue. Before that, in the Reagan 80s and the Bush Senior, their first Bush, early 90s, 89 or 90s, whatever, California was red on the presidential elections. So Clinton and I remember he got my conservative grandparents to be like, to vote for him. I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Like, what, you buy this guy's BS? Like, I don't know. I didn't understand politics at all, but now looking back, I can see like Clinton could just drop it. I mean, you could be like some obscure country, city in the Middle East, and he would just start talking, boom, 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 and he would nail it. I mean, even better than Obama. I think he was less intellectual than Obama, but a little bit and a little bit more articulate, like, than Obama, which it's hard to say because both those guys were very intellectual and articulate, but Obama, especially compared to Bush, give me a break, and even compared to Trump, like, Obama's like very articulate for the most part. But that's the thing too, like, you can go back with any of these president people, candidates, whatever, and you can pull up a whole bunch of junk on them, like, that makes them look bad out of context. My mom had said that she was watching this movie on Sarah Palin called, what is it called? Game Change or something like that. And I was like, okay, you know, hearing her out on it and everything. And she's like, yeah, you know, just describing the what's going on and who the actors were. And she's mentioned Woody Harrelson. I was like, huh, that's really Woody Harrelson's in a, is that an anti-Sarah Palin movie? Is it like an anti-conservative movie? And she was like, oh no, it's not. It's just like a sort of neutral kind of movie. And I was like, oh, wow, did Woody Harrelson's, that makes sense, because I've always liked Woody Harrelson for the most part. I mean, I've liked Woody Harrelson. I like him as an actor. I like his political views in the past. I'm a vegan, you know what I mean? Like, he's been my guy. I've identified with Woody. Like, I've been like, yeah, that's my guy right there. That's my guy in Hollywood, you know, and everything. And then one of my friends, I hate to say it, one of my former friends, but, you know, I like to still consider him a friend, but I think politics have divided us, and even more than politics, I would say intellect has divided us. But he actually even got to cook for Woody Harrelson at the restaurant he was working at, that he got me a job washing dishes at, that I thought was really cool. One of the coolest restaurant, well, tied for the coolest restaurant I'd ever worked at in my life, in Portland. Restaurant, one of the restaurant capitals of the world, right? I worked at McCormick Schmick's Harborside there, my first restaurant gig, which he got me. He wasn't going to work one day, so he dressed me up in his uniform and took me into work. And they told him that he needed to put on the uniform and do his job, and that I could come back the next day and have a job. So, and that was just unbelievable. If you're in Portland, stop by McCormick and Schmick's. That's one of those restaurants where the guys start out as dishwashers there, a lot of the guys, and they work their way up the line, and the food is phenomenal. They fed me that was my only meal that I ate every day, was my shift meal that I got at that restaurant, and I never would even finish the meal, and I never felt parched. You know, I was able to go in and just kick butt on my shift every work day and everything like that, and those people treated me with full respect. That was just like that was honestly just one of the I've had a ton of jobs too. I've worked such a diverse, you know, like, I've worked so many jobs, but that was so cool to work there. That was like one of the best experiences of my life. And then the other job he got me was a dishwasher at an Italian restaurant there, Fratelli, and that place was so authentically Italian, but nobody was Italian. But it was authentically Italian in the spirit and the soul of the way it was run. And, you know, even some of the food they would serve wasn't even Italian per se, of what you'd expect to go to Italy or find, but they were able to crunch the culture. I want to say the head chef there, Chef Paul, do I remember his name? Is his name Chef? Oh man, Chef Boyd at McCormick and Schmick's. It's been so long now, I can't believe can't even be solid on their names. But the head chefs at those places, those guys were like really people to look up to, you know, and they're just so kind-hearted, give you the benefit of the doubt, and they are just, you know, these are people who are in the trenches with you through thick and thin. You know, the dishwashing machine goes out, and all those guys, you know, these are guys that could just be sitting at home in pink slippers if they wanted to, collecting money off their restaurant, and they're there in the trenches every freaking night, you know, as many nights as you are. And like, the dishwasher went down, the machine, one time when I was there, and everybody just chipped in and helped. Like, we're over there hand scrubbing dishes, and meanwhile they've got their insane line going, you know, cooking for people like Woody Harrelson and stuff like that. And it was just like, it was such a trip. So those that restaurant bit, like the true restaurant bit. And then I went and worked for like a couple of restaurants where it's like, you don't even call yourself a chef. You know what I mean? I worked with some chefs, and then you go to those big corporate you're working there and they get bought out by another corporate umbrella and all that crap. It's like, no, a real restaurant, the chefs run it. There might be a corporate umbrella or any of that type of thing, but they let the chefs run the restaurant purely. And those are the restaurants those are what's up. But anyway, another tangent there that kind of lost myself on why I went off on that. That was my buddy, got me the job there. Been divided over politics and intellect and the lack thereof. I've been able to see where, like, even I watched a clip from the recent Simpsons episode where it was just like, are you kidding me? You know, they did this whole thing where they try and have Homer be the dork without the mask. And that's one thing. He's a big fan of The Simpsons and some of the like The Simpsons, I want to say, you know what, even though they've tried to take people who had intellect, who had good intellect at whatever points in their life, they took them and they ran off the cliff without the rocket pack or anti-gravity shoes with them. And that's where I feel bad because, but I mean, he's also into shows like Family Guy, and it's like, why are you going to listen to some guy who talks like an idiot with nuts hanging off his chin? You know what I mean? Like, that, it's just, those shows, I don't have any sympathy for anybody who falls for that crap, right? But The Simpsons can lure you in. They are intellectual geniuses. And they use that, they manipulate people just like Borat. Borat is an intellectual comedic genius, and he has used that for evil. And that sucks because he was one of my favorite people too. But like The Simpsons, they use Homer as this guy who's like this Trump supporter supposedly, and just try and play it out to be like the Trump supporters are these Homer kind of people. And I'm sure that's true a lot of times, like with, you know, a lot of those kind of people, but it's just, that's not true across the board. You know what I mean? And there's people who obviously are idiots that are on all sides of the equations. But anyway, what I wanted to segue to is the fact that how politicians get manipulated. And I brought up the thing with Sarah Palin in that movie, Woody Harrelson. And so that, it got me thinking, right? And then I was over in another forum, probably the forum that you're seeing this video in right now, and somebody had mentioned Sarah Palin, and what's up? Shout out to you, who probably knows who you are if you mentioned Sarah Palin. I don't want to say anybody's name though specifically. And I started thinking, like, my first thought was like, oh, how dumb, Sarah Palin, right? Because, you know, just my first instinctual thought, because back in the, you know, that was a tail end of the Bush era, right? And then it was like McCain, Palin. I really liked McCain. Wouldn't ever have voted for him, was really bummed out to see the signs all around my area that said McCain on it. But I always felt like McCain was like a liberal running under the Republican ticket. And I felt the opposite about Obama with my perception of politics. I always felt like Obama was like a conservative, what I considered like a conservative type of character running under the Democrat ticket. And I was just like, whoa, what a trip. But oh man, I don't know. That was just so weird. But at the same time, I was so discomforted by the idea. Like, I would have never cast a vote for either one of them, right? But I thought maybe if McCain won, it would be interesting because he would, of how he, to me, I think he would have played out like how Trump played out. That's what I wanted to think back then, without the media blitz maybe around him. But Trump has been media blitzed, whatever, believe it or not. Go look into it. You know what I mean? Really, go dig into this stuff, which I'm about to give you just a taste of the tip of that iceberg. And so anyway, that movie with Woody Harrelson, I knew he was a liberal, and I thought like, wow, does he know enough to pull his head out of his ass? Because I had to learn kind of the hardish way of like, hey, wake up, dude. You know what I mean? Like, don't automatically think that every one of these conservatives is bad, right? You got to give the benefit of the doubt sometimes, or like look into it yourself and confirm it. And if it's true, the facts will back it up right away. And that didn't happen with Trump. And then I kept digging and digging and digging, and it wasn't happening. And I was starting to find out all this stuff about, because I had originally heard from people who were writing about him that like, oh, Trump's this knuckle dragger guy. He goes home and like watches gorillas kiss each other on TV and bangs on the TV and tells him to fight, like some weird article like that I'd written. I was trying to, or not written, read, and there was just blurbs like that. And then there was actually this like liberal rag here in town, so-called liberal rag. I thought they'd gone conservative because of my perception of politics, but it turns out they went quote unquote like neoliberal, which I'm definitely not. Even though I was hard left, I wasn't ever a neoliberal. But I would open it up and read this little comic that was like 9 times out of 10 anti-Trump. And I wasn't necessarily anti-Trump, but I just liked the humor. I thought this comic writer was really good. And then the third thing was I ran into somebody who, I was actually at the Occupy here way back, the first big Occupy. I wasn't somebody who like proactively went to Occupy. I was like the real dude living out in the woods in a tent with a little commune of my buddies and trying to make it. You know what I mean? Holding down a job half the time, like that kind of a thing. And really just, whether or not I was anti-establishment, I was, but I wasn't like, and you could say I was borderline radicalized, but not anywhere, not capital R radicalized like these people. I wouldn't even say I was radicalized. That's a bad way to put it. But I would say that I wanted to think that I almost was, but I never wanted to step over that line and actually be like crazy. You know what I mean? But I wanted to be right up to like toe that line of like, I'm on this side of sanity, but don't think I'm not standing on the outside boundary away from all of you crazy people or whoever I was thinking of people as, like I'm not participating in your system and I want to see an alternate system, but I never wanted to overthrow the existing system. I just wanted to be able to have my own little bubble within that system that said like, hey, you can go have this tent commune and of cool people, like-minded people, and you guys can produce goods and participate in this capitalist economy, but you can live as communist or socialist or whatever, lack of a better term you want to think of, like that type of lifestyle there in harmony. I wanted to be a harmonious system. I never, even though, I had my views about dollar bills and capitalism and all those kind of things, I never once wanted to overthrow it, and I definitely didn't want to do that in any sort of violent type of way. But anyway, I ended up at that Occupy, which coincidentally was, I can say I occupied Wall Street on the West Coast because it was on the coincidentally on the corner of Portland and Wall Street here in Bend, Oregon, which was funny because it's like Portland and Wall Street is the streets it was on the corner of. But yeah, I go there and I was just taking my buddy by there. Like we were on downtown to the library or something. That's where I'd go and use that resource a lot to like get on the computers and for an hour or two or whatever and do that sort of thing. And just keep on keeping on, right? Well, we were hungry and he's like, dude, you got to stop here and they got free food, like let's go up here and eat. And I was like, whatever, they probably don't have anything vegan or whatever. He's like, no, dude, come up here and check it out. And he's like, these people are really cool. And he was a homeless friend of mine who I'd taken out to that camp, and he was living out there with me too. And I was like, dude, I'm not stepping on, like, these people are weird with their stupid stock market signs, and like, these are like upper middle class people that I don't identify with. I think they're goofy. They're trying to like act like they're living in tents. I really live in a freaking tent. I don't need these like facade people, right? Like I don't need nothing to do with them. Well, finally he's like, dude, just come on, just give it a 5-minute chance. We'll just grab a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and go or something, like don't be an idiot. And I was like, all right, fine. And so I walked up there, sat at a table, and sure enough, the group of liberals that I met at that time were cool. I gotta say, somebody sat down and started talking with me, and I didn't get up and leave until the end of that Occupy thing. I stayed there. I never even went back out to my camp until that whole thing was totally done and over with. I was one of the last people to leave. It was a really cool experience. It was like the people where it was just such a trip to be with so many like-minded people to where you don't have to sit there and like explain your views up to a certain point, and then it's like, okay, you're at a bar trying to talk to somebody or whatever given situation, and then by the time you get to anything, you're too drunk, the night's over, and it's like, okay, we barely like figured out where we were at with stuff and stopped making sense. And now that whole time period's gone. It was like you could pick up with like how far you'd gotten with whatever ideas and discussions in the past or whatever, and go from there. And that was real progressive liberalism to me. That, not this like cookie cutter boxed in before you were born, we've got a whole agenda, so-called progressive liberalism. This was like really like, we're talking as individuals with intellect and individual thought, which this so-called progressive liberalism movement, I don't see much of that, if at all. And I would like to imagine it goes on a small scale. It must, because of the way that some people fall in love with it. But that was cool. And there was food there, and it was vegan, and there were some other vegans that would bring food there. And so it was like, wow, it was just like so taken care of. All glory to God, you know. And that was just such a powerful time. So it was, I can understand that whole thing of where like there is a certain like, it's like the intellectual version of spiritualism or something. I don't know how to put it. And it can be deceiving, you know, and whatever. So you just got to remind yourself that like, hey, there's no such thing as a utopia, right? But we can all be dreamers, you know, but we have to come back to reality and land. And the word utopia, even if you go and look up the etymology and the meaning, the literal meanings of these words, utopia means not place. It means a non-place. The person who coined that term coined it because it means a place that doesn't exist. A utopia is what they sell you on, and then when you get there, it quickly turns into a dystopia. And I think we all know what that word means. It reminds me of like what Amazon did to Whole Foods. And you go in there and it's like, oh, I'll take a slice of that pizza. That looks vegan pizza. Wow, how cool. I don't have to make it myself. Sure, I'll take a slice of that. And then you go to pick it up and it just flops like a piece of paper. It's like the pizza looks so appetizing when you go to get it. And then you realize, well, this is like a sliver of paper. Like I need like 10 pieces of this to even get a meal in, you know, like this is nothing. And that's the way I see like a dystopia, is just like, it looks appealing. You're like, wow, you know, there it is. There's my vegan pizza. And then once you get it, you're like, I'm never shopping here again. This is not the Whole Foods I remember, you know? No, it's not. It's the much closer to being socialized, even though it is a, you know, in a more of a monopoly capitalistic type of a setting. That's what you end up with socialism. And I'm not one of those people who's just going to say, oh, it's never worked before, because that answer used to piss me off back in the day. Like, oh, can't we do it new? Can't we do it better? You know, who's to say, can't we learn from all those mistakes before? Can't we get it right this time? But the fact is, I mean, the plain and simple way to put it, I'm not getting any younger. I feel like I have enough experience and wisdom to say this, is that you're picking one corporation instead of many. So if you don't like what these corporations that are getting fewer and fewer with their bigger and bigger umbrellas, if you don't like what they're doing, well, guess what? Socialism, communism, whateverism you want to call it, Marxism, it's not going to be no better, because you're going to get one corporation effectively, and that's going to be the state. And they do have a tendency to, would, you know, all I can go by off of that is how people have historically been treated in those settings. And they're bad. That's not what the U.S. was created about. The U.S. was created, not that it was right, not that, you know, what supposedly happened with the indigenous people or slavery or none of that. I'm not trying to say that any of that had an ounce of being good to it, but the ideals, the conceptual model, the positive model, you know, that didn't have to do with that stuff. That was the thing, you know, that was getting away from those dark empires and that whole type of a system. So with that being said, the thing I was trying to get to, if I can ever wrap up a point, is that the Woody Harrelson thing was a big flag of like, whoa, what's going on here, right? And then I'd seen the person who said, you know, that mentioned Sarah Palin in a positive thing, and I thought, well, I had a negative view of her regardless. I always thought she was a complete idiot, and whatever, just always, that was always my opinion across the board. Everything I saw or heard about her, and she just disgusted me. And that's all there was to it, you know? And I was even disgusted by Joe Biden, but I think I was less disgusted, maybe because he was supposedly a liberal. I don't know. I thought. But I remember even back then thinking, like, Joe Biden's a racist. Oh my God, I can't believe the stuff this guy says. And I would think that, even though I didn't necessarily hate on him, but I was like, man, and it would trip me out. I would forget he was vice president, and I was like, oh, that's right. It's that guy. I can't believe he got in as vice president. How weird, you know? Like, and under Obama, too. Like, how bizarre. But, anyway, so I decided to go look into like the movie. My mom said that Sarah Palin, my mom was talking about her positive, like neutral, you know, not saying that she was a total idiot, but she was saying that she basically would like memorize stuff according to the movie, and that she wasn't too smart. She was just kind of good at memorizing facts, like right before she would go on to do her talks and stuff, and it had to be very choreographed and stuff like that. I thought, okay, you know, I don't have anything else to go by, and I thought, I'm probably not going to watch this movie, you know, but probably should if I want to form an opinion about it. But anyway, like I said, this person had brought up Sarah Palin, so I thought, you know what, now's the time. Now's the time. I got her in a positive light, and then I've heard some stuff from that movie that sort of puts her in a negative light to me. So I'm going to go do a fact check for myself, believe it or not. And I did, and I started digging in. And what I found must have been some conservatives defending her for the most part, most of the stuff on the surface. And what they did was they redirected all of those accusations of the stuff, you know, the ones I was finding back towards like people like Obama and stuff. But I didn't realize that as I'm reading it. I'm like, oh, wow, they've got the goods. This stuff is true on Sarah Palin, right? She really did say there's 57 states and all this stuff like that. And then I was like, oh, wow, they got me. The conservatives got me. These are all Obama quotes. Oh, wow. And Obama, I'm not saying he's an idiot. I think that dude is super articulate. He's definitely one of the most articulate presidents in my lifetime. You know what I mean? Like, an intellectual and all that. Like, I'm not trying to say that dude's an idiot, but I've never thought that about him. You know what I mean? I maybe didn't like him and he scared me and stuff like that, but I've never thought, like, I thought Sarah Palin was a straight goof, okay? Like, that's my overall impression of her. But all this stuff, and it reminds me of now, too, where it's like all this stuff they say about Trump, if you look at the accusers, they're the ones guilty of it. And it's like, whoa, what a trip. Not to say she did screw up on some stuff and everything, but when you start digging into that, it's like, oh, it was an honest slip. You know what I mean? And if you go into the stuff on Obama where he said stuff, it's probably an honest slip too, it seemed like. It's like one of the things I was watching, he's like, oh, we've been to, I think, 57 states campaigning. And it's like, yeah, I do the same thing. He's probably tired from campaigning his ass off, and he's probably thinking 47 states and saying 57. You know, like, big deal. Like, people, especially when you follow him around with the camera long enough, you're going to find people making mistakes. That does not represent his overall character. Obama's super articulate. He probably at one point in his life could have told you how many counties are in every state or something like that. You know, like, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, and maybe even Sarah Palin, who don't have a whole lot of info about, right? But I just want to sort of put that out there, that it's easy to do it on either side of the coin and paint these people out to be like whatever. So that being said, that seems to have been the case with Trump. I'm just going to let this stuff go. I think I've said enough about that for now. So here's the thing, and you can see, you probably know what I'm talking about right out of the gate. This is one of the things the Simpsons tried to call him out on that episode, of saying that he was making fun of a disabled news reporter, and he was mocking that reporter. I don't think he was making fun, and I'm about to demonstrate the evidence of why I don't think he was making fun of that reporter. So for one thing, here's the whole mainstream, sometimes people call it lamestream, right? Media. Is there a thing on Twitter? Okay, I did a cutout of it because the timeline's always changing. So here's the thing they show, right? They show the reporter, and obviously he has a little bit of, you know, like a birth defect going on with his hand right here and everything. And then they show Trump, which this is him. This is a snapshot, 30 frames per second, right, of him mocking this reporter. Looks very bad. Very bad. I mean, clearly it looks like he's mocking the hand and everything, and he's, got some expression on his face that I can only imagine that he's trying to act like he's retarded or something like that. This guy clearly doesn't look like he's necessarily like that or anything, but regardless, there's what I see. And if I'm touch and go like I was through most of Trump's first term as president, then I would think like, oh man, I don't know for sure that he's mocking. This doesn't look good though, like, ooh, this, you know what I mean? And that's just sort of stacking up in my mind on the little stack there of like, not good, man. Wow, like not cool, right? But then, so like, let's do the investigation on this. Let's see what's up. So come over here, search it, Trump disabled reporter, just a few keywords to bring this stuff up. And see, there's ABC News has it frozen on that same frame. This one, Trump's expression, all of them, they're, I've obviously sort of cherry picked with my keywords going for, I want to find this type of, I want to find the short, straight to the point junk. So here we go.
Right after a couple of good paragraphs, it's talking about northern New Jersey, draws the prober's eye. Written by a nice reporter. Now the poor guy, you got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember. He's going like, I don't remember. Oh, maybe that's what I said. This was 14 years ago. They didn't do a retraction.
Okay. So you can see it. You could, if you don't like Trump, you obviously could take that bad, right? But it's within context. Like, he's spastic, and don't take my word. I'm about to back this up, okay, with real evidence. I'm just going to let you know what I was thinking. Okay, maybe this is the case. What I'm going to tell you is that he's spastically imitating this guy, and he's not focused on the guy's disability. Maybe he's forgotten or never knew, who knows, whatever, that the guy was disabled in the first place, if you want to call that a disability, right? So Trump is just doing this. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say he's just doing this, right? So he said, and now they're talking about northern New Jersey right after a couple of good paragraphs. So for one thing, he says that the guy said some good stuff. That's what I'm getting. I could be wrong, but to the
right
best.
After a couple of good paragraphs, it's talking about northern New Jersey, draws the prober's eye. Written by a nice reporter.
Written by a nice reporter. Am I wrong, or is he not complimenting the guy saying written by a nice reporter? And then he goes off to do the spasm.
Poor guy, you got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember. He's going like.
Obviously he didn't just tuck his arm in right there and hold it right there the whole time. But it was a thing. So it's like, now we've got to ask ourselves the question, is that just the way that Trump mocks people from 14 years earlier or something, or however many years earlier, or is that are tearing into him and doing something bad where he's obviously like worked up and a little bit defensive, or was he specifically going with this person's disability?
I don't remember. Oh, maybe that's what I said.
Doesn't look good so far, right? Okay, here goes the evidence.
Vacation. If somebody said you have to go away for
Sorry
2
about
weeks,
the volume.
You're going to Africa on a safari. There's not going
It's
to be
about
any
2005.
phones. You know what? Get me out of here, right? So that's to me.
That's him talking about himself. That's him talking about himself.
Is going on a 2-week
Sorry about the
vacation.
volume
Somebody said
differences.
you have to go away for 2 weeks. You're going to Africa on a safari. There's not going to be any phones. You know what? Get me out of here, right? So that's to me.
So that's Trump. That's him mimicking himself. He does similar gestures, whatever, right? That's not enough. What's this?
The banks now, they can't do anything. They're run by the regulators. In all fairness to the banks, they're run by the regulators. When you see the president of the bank, I mentioned the word regulator. These guys come in.
Right there. So what if that banker that he's talking about, the regulator of that bank, what if that guy had issue with his development of his hand? Then Trump would have just been guilty of.
The banks now, they can't do anything. They're run by the regulators. In all fairness to the banks, they're run by the regulators. When you see the president of the bank, I mentioned the word regulator.
He did pretty similar hand gesture, right? Here's the gentleman that he was accused of mocking.
At a bar at the time, among several other.
So you can see that this person, he's
patrons.
mild manner, intellectual. He's not real spastic. So it's not like Trump's whatever. So you can see that they've cherry picked the photos, the stills. They cherry picked a still of this gentleman with his hand out and with Trump. Bad coincidence. I doubt, honestly, knowing Trump's
and I watched
character.
the general recently on television, and they said to him, "What do you think about ISIS?" "Oh, ISIS is very tough." "Oh,
That was the same talk,
ISIS is very tough."
the same exact speech, and he made fun of a general in a similar way.
And we'll get some of these regulators out of
This
the
is
banks
sort of
so
a
you can borrow
compilation.
and you can help. Because, you know, the banks...
I'm going to pause this because the volume, sorry about the audio quality and stuff. I don't know if you could hear me, but this, obviously this first one's the same clip, but this is sort of a quick compilation, a 1-minute compilation of several clips where he's doing these types of mannerisms. And then the very last one, I think they show that last one just to show you this is a Catholic for Trump's side. I'm not pro-Catholic or anything like that. Like, you know, freedom of religion to people for sure. We shouldn't persecute anybody, right? But this site just happened to be a site that made these clips, compiled them, and made them easy to find in one place, you know? So it's not like, even though they are defending him and they are a religious institution or whatever, I'm not trying to, like, that's irrelevant.
The banks now, they can't do anything. They're run by the regulators. In all fairness to the banks, they're run by the regulators. When you see the president of the bank, I mentioned the word regulator.
I mean, he's
these guys come in, they run
speaking
the
out against the
and I
BS
watched
with
the
the
general
banks.
recently on television.
Wasn't
And they
that what the
said to
original
him,
Occupy was about?
"What do you think about ISIS?" "Oh, ISIS is very tough."
Same speech.
And I'm saying, first of all, why is a general on television? I don't want my generals on television.
I heard Ted's a good debater. I said he is a good debater, but he can't talk, okay? Bad talker. He's a good debater, bad talker. So he's over here. They asked him about waterboarding. They said, "Senator Cruz, what do you think of waterboarding?" "Oh, I don't want to talk about it." You know, he didn't want to talk about waterboarding because too controversial. And I'm saying to myself, they're chopping off heads. He doesn't want to talk about waterboarding.
A couple of good paragraphs. And talking about northern New Jersey draws the prober's eye. Written by a nice reporter. Now the poor guy, you got to see this guy. "Oh, I don't know what I said. Oh, I don't remember." He's going like, "I don't remember. I thought, oh, maybe that's what I said." This is 14 years ago. They didn't do a retraction. 14 years ago, they did no retraction.
I think it's a bad coincidence. That's my opinion. You're welcome, of course, to yours. If you know, look at the stuff Trump's talking about. He's bringing up the hard issues like waterboarding. He's bringing up banks, you know, not to detract from the original subject too much, but just maybe, if anything, if you're somebody who isn't normally like Trump at all, then maybe like, hey, this guy's bringing up the hard questions that even people like Obama weren't saying much about. Speaking of cages, another thing mentioned on The Simpsons, those are from the Barack Obama era. Let's look at it. Border, and they call them cages. It's like border cages. And I was really, you know, my first thought when I came to this was like, I don't care about the politics behind it. I care about the kids. You know what I mean? And regardless, I knew that it probably wasn't going to be as bad as it seemed or whatever, but I still cared. I'm like, well, regardless, are these kids, do they even have access to like Disney movies? That was one of the things I told my wife. I was like, you know, there's probably a big screen TV over there with Disney movies that they're not showing you. And right here, we can actually see them in these images right here. There it is. Like, boom, here's the area when it's totally empty, probably during some point in the day. There's a kid watching it. It's like, so yeah, it's not the most ideal setting, but this is a kid from a borderline third world country watching a freaking Disney movie in a clean, sanitary place with a officer there to protect him from violence, you know, from murder, like all sorts of stuff. These people, a lot of them are ditching their kids at the border because they want them to be in America, even in this setting. You know what I mean? I've known people, I've been a person living under a bridge that probably would have loved to live, not forever, you know, but would have loved to have an environment like this at some point. And that's just me. I'm not trying to say that, like, whatever. I'm just saying there's people out there, and I can speak for myself as been one of them at whatever points in time, that would appreciate being out of the weather and being fed 3 meals and even having a space blanket to sleep in. You know what I mean? Obviously not the most ideal situation, but these people walked far to get here. And yeah, it's chain link. dividing the areas, and it's like, okay, you came here, you guys all want to be in here and stuff, so yeah, it's a chain link area, big deal. It's like, if you don't like it, don't try and cross the border illegally. You know what I mean? You can go to the normal border crossing and they'll either accept or reject you. They don't throw you in a cage. There's who knows? These kids could have been up for days before they even ended up here. They're wearing clean clothes, probably brand new clean clothes that they were given, And these, I hate to say it, but get out there and check out the world. You know what I mean? There's a lot worse conditions. Now, here's my point about these. These cages were built during the Obama era, and they try and push it off as a Trump-only institution. You know what I mean? And what's Trump doing? He's building a fence. It's not a wall. He calls it a wall. I'm not trying to defend anything about that, but it's a fence. If you look, you can stick your arm through it. That, to me, a wall, you can't see who's on the other side. If you can hand somebody a freaking sandwich through it, it's a fence. So they're building a border fence, and that's to prevent this type of thing from happening nearly as much. I mean, I'm not trying to defend it in either way, but I'm just pointing out the facts of what goes on there. So let's go back to all. Fact check: Obama administration built migrant cages. USA Today, top result. I'll click on it. I don't even remember if this is the so-called fact check that I did, And like I said, I'm always leery about fact checks. I don't think there's any such thing as a fact, right? This would probably be the closest thing. The claim: Michelle Obama criticized the Trump administration for putting kids in cages, but the cages were built during the Obama. How sick, too. How sick. I don't like her. I'm sorry. I've tried. I don't like her. And I'm not trying to say she's a dude or any of that stupid stuff that the news, they try and blow stuff overboard. It's like, you know what? There's plenty of stuff not to like this woman about. No reason to go calling her, even if she was a dude, who cares? But that's totally milked BS. I'm not seeing any real evidence that she's a dude. The claim, illustrated in a Facebook meme that recently went viral: former President Barack Obama's head was superimposed over the face of a person in a construction worker's outfit. Obama stands in front of the crowds of fenced-in children who are supposedly migrants detained at the southern U.S. border. The text above the image reads: Michelle Obama, Trump is putting kids in cages. Guy who built the cages. Barack Obama is implied as the guy who built the cages. So this is one of those things where these fact checks get weird, where it's like, okay, are they going to say that, no, Barack actually wasn't on the construction site? That's a fake meme, of course. But are they going to admit that it was built during the Obama administration? I don't know. Let's see. The meme was posted on the Facebook page. They do all this to try and get people to leave, I feel like, where it's like, really, why can't you just say yes or no? The meme, this is who it was posted by, and this is what they were eating at the time. The meme was posted to the Facebook page Vintage Political Memes. The page is an extension of Being Liberation LLC, a group that caters to quote-unquote minarchists, classic liberals, anarchists, independents, objectivists, capitalists, and right-left-leaning libertarians, according to its website. The picture in the meme, minus the inserted Barack Obama, of a crowded enclosure full of migrant children at the border facility in Texas was released by the Office of the Inspector General in 2019, according to a tweet by NBC News correspondent. A senior manager called to the facility as a ticking time bomb. Really? Okay, you're just trying to get people to go away because we know everybody's got a 250 character time span these days. Where is it? What Michelle Obama said, okay, well, they can't just answer the question. Were they built during the Obama administration? During her keynote address at the DNC on August 19th, the former First Lady made a comment about Trump's administration's policies towards migrant children detained at the border. And of course, they had singled out one particular photo of this kid to make it look like he was literally isolated in this cage, which was not true if you go and look at the context of that photo. I'm sorry, I gotta get these ugly people. Oh, that was that person who I clicked off when I said ugly. She's not ugly. That was the Pennsylvania person that I was talking about, that I was citing earlier. But I don't like Hillary at all. They watch in horror as the children are torn from their families and thrown into cages, Mrs. Obama, according to the Associated Press. More, the U.S. government. They're already trying to lead us away with other links out. Are they, what? Are they not going to? Okay. They see our leaders labeling fellow citizens as enemies of the state while in 44 tracking cookies. Sorry to sidetrack. This site has 44 cookies that are 44 individual little lines of code that are trying to track where I've been and where I'm going. That is insane. I mean, 20 is insane, but 44, get out of here. They see our leaders labeling fellow citizens enemies of the state while emboldening torch-bearing white supremacists. They watch in horror as children are torn from their families and thrown into cages. A lot of these people won't even claim their kids. I mean, look into their real facts. I just am clicking on the top of the page journalistic article just to not be like cherry picking necessarily, you know? Like I'm just like, okay, here's popular, like whatever, probably so-called leftist media, right? And pepper spray and rubber bullets are used on peaceful protesters for a photo op, she said. It is true that the Trump administration immigration policies involve separating migrant children from their parents and detaining them in quote-unquote cages, a practice halted by a federal judge in 2018, according to USA Today. During the speech, Obama did not mention the holding enclosures were built during her husband's administration. Wow! Wow, they just totally twisted that. It is true that the Trump administration immigration policies involve separating. I shouldn't act so surprised, but it's like, wow, look at that. They're like trying to say, oh, it is true that kids got separated from their parents as a practice in these quote unquote cages. At least they put it in quote unquote cages because it's like, yeah, it's depending on what perspective you're from. You know, not that you can't view them as that, you know, obviously, you know, if you put a bird in there, it's going to be a cage compared to flying out in the wild. But if that bird's trying to get attacked by dinosaurs, maybe, or whatever, you know, or get shot at by hunters, they'd probably prefer to be in this so-called, like, cage, right? Halted by a federal judge. During the speech, Obama did not mention the holding enclosures were built during her husband's administration. There's the answer to this fact check buried. And it could even be construed wrong, like she never said they were. Yeah, of course not, you know, da-da-da-da-da. This is not a good fact check. This is why I'm worried when they say experts, fact checkers. In a 2019 interview, nonpartisan think tank, Barack Obama told NPR the cages predate. In a 2019 interview with a nonpartisan think tank, the Aspen Institute, Jay Johnson, Barack Obama's Homeland Security Secretary, told NPR, a definite left-wing news source that I used to love up until, you know, the last year or so, Mary Louise Kelly, that the quote-unquote cages predate the Trump administration. Okay? Do you see how they're trying to bury this in stuff? Like, it's there, the info's there, but it's like, yeah, right. If you're at the point of skimming by there, you're like, I'm looking for this and I'm barely noticing it. The chain link barriers, partition fences, and cages, whatever you want to call them, were not invented January 20th, 2017, Trump's inauguration, right? They were not invented on that, Johnson said. Kelly asked Johnson about a 2014 photograph of him touring Arizona facility, da-da-da-da-da. Obviously, they're trying to bed it down. That's what George Carlin directly addressed as that soft speak that is used by propagandists, and it's disgusting. You know what I mean? This is supposed to be fair and unbiased news, and they have, I don't know, maybe that's just me. Feel free to have your own opinion about it, but the way that information was spun, that's a matter-of-fact question. I shouldn't have to come down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages down the thing to find out that fact check. Obama administration approved, built temporary holding enclosures at southern border. Yes. That should be yes right here. Like, answer yes. Here's the details. No, what they want you to do is keep reading. There's supposed to be advertisers here, but I don't have ad blocked at all. What I have is tracking cookies, trackers blocked, right? And they politely call them potential trackers, but if it's red, that means it's a definite tracker. Yellow means maybe more potential. You know what I mean? 2 out of freaking almost 50 are safe out of that whole thing. And don't think Google's a freaking gem either, because you'll see that, you know, they might be green down there for Google ad services, but if you come up here, you will most likely see lots of Google. News.google, ad services.google, Google Analytics, all that kind of stuff. So if you're using Google Analytics on your pages, you're selling out most all of your visitors. I've done it in the past, do it for a minute, whatever, get your idea about people, and then get rid of that cookie off your page. You don't need to track people that bad. There's far better ways of doing stuff. But you can do that with a lot of stuff, so just dig into the stuff that's supposedly what Trump has done, all this stuff. He's getting a bad rap. It's not a fair and unbiased rap. If it was, there's a handful of things you could call him out on. You know what I mean? There's people who try, even conservative libertarians like David Knight, trying to call him out on being a warmonger person, and it's like, well, yeah, he's supposedly inherited the military-industrial complex, just, for better or worse. Not that the military doesn't do a lot of good. There are a lot of people who do a lot of good in the military, and there are people who die doing a lot of good in the military. But we all know, and I think the people in the military will, a lot of them, especially in certain ranks in the military and stuff, will tell you that they are contract killers. And so there's two sides to that coin, right? For better and worse. That being said, every president of the United States is going to inherit a military-industrial complex. Whether or not there's a socialist government in place or capitalist or whatever government you want to call it, there will always be a military-industrial complex. The thing with the isms, the socialisms and communism type of industrial complexes, a lot of times that military turns in towards its own people. Historically, of course, I'm not saying it has to do that every time, but historically that has been the case with those types of militaries, that when they're not off defending themselves, like, yeah, they'll be defending themselves from whatever US-like countries that might come in to maybe stop them from that so-called domino effect that they used back in Vietnam. Which was all this stuff's come to light to me, over this past year, of just like, wow, I always thought the domino effect of communism was BS. And I honestly think it was. I mean, I don't know enough to know anything, like, I really can't say that I ever feel solid on my opinions on Vietnam or any of that stuff, especially I wasn't even alive then. But the whole thing is that, from what I can gather, I still think the stop of the domino effect of communism was BS, mostly. I feel like, honestly, if somebody has evidence to the contrary, please provide it. I would want to see that. But I do think there is a domino effect to communism. I do think that's a real thing, and I think we're seeing it now. That's my personal opinion. So that's just interesting to see, like, wow, there was a little bit of truth to go with that medicine or whatever, like that did have a basis in reality, even though it didn't. I don't think it aligned at that time in that region. I could be wrong, but I feel like that was more, I don't know. I haven't studied the Vietnam War in years at this point, so and my memory on stuff, I just jam-pack so much in. It's just like, it doesn't sit well, and then I jam-pack more stuff on other topics around it, so I just forget most of it.